Over the weekend of May 11th, 2018, rapper Amir Van, most popularly associated with hip-hop collective and boy band Brockhampton, was accused of sexual misconduct by multiple women claiming to be ex-girlfriends of his. Their allegations ranged from cheating to emotional manipulation and psychological abuse to sexual relations with underage girls. In a Twitter thread released on May 12th, Amir admitted to being emotionally abusive and to cheating, but denied having relations with a minor or otherwise violating the consent of anyone. He ended this thread by stating that he hoped to become an example of somebody who learned to grow from his mistakes and become a better person. During an Instagram live video on May 23rd, Brockhampton member Kevin Abstract apologized for not addressing the situation sooner. Brockhampton had deactivated their social media accounts before the allegations surfaced, and claimed that Amir had been getting help for over a year to better himself. Regular viewers of this channel will know how much of an impact Brockhampton has personally had on me in the past year. Their Saturation trilogy was a three-way tie for number 1 on my list of my favorite albums of 2017, and I've sung the band's praises every chance I've been able to. The band's forward-thinking sound and their themes of queer acceptance, self-expression, and self-love resonated with me and countless others. Like most Brockhampton fans, I found myself troubled by the allegations levied against Amir. Allegations of sexual misconduct have become a much more common occurrence in the past year, but I never expected that this sort of thing would hit so close to home. At least not for a second time. The first time was February 26th, 2016, when folk musician Larkin Grimm accused Michael Gira of the experimental rock band Swans of raping her in 2008 while recording her album Parplar, which Gira produced. This allegation came shortly after news had broken that pop singer Kesha's motion to be released from her contract with Sony and her abusive producer Dr. Luke had been denied. Initially referring to the allegations as a slanderous lie, Gira later clarified that he believed the encounter he had with Grimm was a consensual romantic moment that fortunately was not consummated, and an awkward mistake for which he had long ago apologized to his wife and family. In a follow-up statement, Grimm stood by her claim that Gira raped her, saying that this is a perfect example of why we need to have education about consent. Gira has maintained his innocence in later interviews. Swans have been one of my favorite bands since high school. Their music, especially the albums they've released since reforming in 2010, exposed me to sonic extremes which I had previously never encountered. Much like with the Amir Van allegations, the accusation that Michael Gira was a rapist was something that I found very difficult to rationalize. It was the first time I really had to sit down and ask myself how to respond when the possibility arises that an artist whom I hold in high regard may have done something terrible. In the wake of the ever-growing Me Too movement, it's a question I've found myself searching for an answer to more and more. Louis C.K., Kevin Spacey, James Toback, Aziz Ansari, John Lasseter, Morgan Freeman, Brett Ratner, Stan Lee, and countless other high-profile men in the creative arts have been accused of sexual misconduct. So, as fans of the creative arts, what can we do to be sure that we are enjoying them responsibly? In 1997, black social activist Tarana Burke sat across from a 13-year-old girl who explained to Burke her experiences with sexual abuse. In a profile in the New York Times, Burke recalled that the young girl's words left her speechless. "I didn't have a response or a way to help her in that moment," she said, "and I couldn't even say me too." Burke founded the nonprofit Just Be Inc. in 2003 to help women heal from sexual assault, and named the movement Me Too in 2007, popularizing the use of this phrase on MySpace to create what she called empowerment through empathy among women, particularly women of color, who have experienced sexual abuse. 10 years later, in October of 2017, several media outlets published laundry lists of allegations of sexual abuse against film producer Harvey Weinstein, co-founder of Miramax and the Weinstein Company. These allegations, combined with a series of allegations dating to as early as 1998, came from over 80 women in the film industry and spanned a period of 30 years. Shortly after many of these allegations were made public, actress Alyssa Milano encouraged any woman who had experienced sexual abuse to write the words use Me Too as a status on various social media platforms as a way of giving people a sense of the magnitude of the problem. The hashtag MeToo became the #1 trending tag on Twitter overnight, and tens of thousands of people shared Me Too stories, including several high-profile celebrities. Lady Gaga, Rosario Dawson, Reese Witherspoon, Gabrielle Union, Bjork, Uma Thurman, and even men including Terry Crews and James Van Der Beek. Discussions were started concerning how sexual abuse should best be dealt with, not just in the entertainment industry, but also in government, academia, finance, sports, and several other fields. The explosion of the Me Too movement brought with it a phenomenon which has become known as the Weinstein effect, in which an unprecedented number of people have come forward to accuse famous or otherwise powerful men of sexual misconduct. Obviously, accusations of sexual misconduct in the entertainment industry didn't begin with Harvey Weinstein in 2017, but Weinstein's allegations have been specifically regarded as a tipping point which has led to an international outcry against sexual abuse. Several publications keep running lists of every famous man who has been accused of sexual misconduct since Harvey Weinstein, and in general it seems that many people are trying to hold celebrities of both the past and present to higher standards, not just in their sexual conduct but also in many other aspects of their personal beliefs, values, and actions. This recent boom in conversations about sexual abuse in specifically the entertainment industry has left many fans of the people implicated in these allegations feeling understandably confused about what to do in the face of them. It can be incredibly difficult to rationalize the idea that somebody who you admire as an artist may be a morally corrupt or indecent person. One series of allegations which struck a nerve with me were the allegations against Kevin Spacey and Bryan Singer, respectively the main star and director of one of my all-time favorite films, The Usual Suspects. They were two of the first men to be implicated in the first wave of the Weinstein effect, and according to many people in Hollywood, their predatory nature, specifically targeting children, was an open secret in the industry, similar to the allegations against Weinstein, which Gwyneth Paltrow made reference to on a David Letterman appearance in 1998. It was frustrating to me that Spacey and Singer were able to get away with these things for so long, and it honestly factored into my enjoyment of their work. I haven't been able to watch The Usual Suspects or any other films starring Spacey since these allegations became public knowledge. Now, some of you might think, well, why should the fact that Kevin Spacey and Bryan Singer are pedophiles factor into your enjoyment of The Usual Suspects? Why can't you separate art from the artist? This hypothetical exchange outlines two popular approaches to responding to the revelation that bad people can make good art: refusing to support the art that bad people make, or continuing to support their art while acknowledging the bad things they get up to in their personal lives, or, more commonly, separating art from the artist. When discussing art made in the past, especially before you were born, separating art from the artist makes sense. I'll refer specifically to music throughout this part because that's my area of expertise. Richard Wagner was a pioneer of late Romantic music, and his inventions and innovations in more adventurous compositional techniques influenced the sound and style of the modernist composers of the early 20th century. His operas are also rife with anti-Semitic and misogynistic characters, which are, by all accounts, reflective of his personal beliefs about Jewish people and women. His anti-Semitic writings in particular earned him the fandom of Adolf Hitler, who used Wagner's music as a symbol of Aryan pride. Now, am I about to reject Wagner's music and art out of hand? No, because it would be impossible to write a history of Western classical music which did not include him, despite his proto-fascist outlook. In fact, many important musicians over the years have done certain things and have held certain opinions which people might find troubling to one degree or another. Igor Stravinsky, who composed masterpieces of the 20th century such as The Rite of Spring and The Firebird, was a monarchist all his life, and loathed liberalism and democratism as much as he loathed liberalism and democratism as much as he loathed the execrable Soviet monster of authoritarian communism. David Bowie, as well as members of the Rolling Stones and Led Zeppelin, have been accused of having sexual relations with underage fans. Bowie also made comments supporting fascism in interviews in the 1970s, and Led Zeppelin have also been accused of stealing song ideas from less popular black musicians. Jazz saxophonist Stan Getz once gave an interview in which he made the comment, "Jazz music is a man's game," which which in context could be interpreted as both sexist and homophobic. Neil Peart, drummer and lyricist of Rush, has stated that his lyrics during the peak of Rush's popularity were inspired by the writings and philosophy of Ayn Rand. The second-wave black metal scene of the late 80s and early 90s counts among its ranks several far-right people of all stripes who have engaged in acts such as arson, murder, and hate crimes. Radiohead have performed in Israel multiple times in recent years despite the ongoing cultural boycott being imposed on Israel by the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. Josh Homme and Jesse Hughes of Queens of the Stone Age and Eagles of Death Metal fame are outspoken, socially liberal, fiscally conservative libertarians, and Hughes has repeatedly made off-color comments in favor of gun ownership rights and against gun control activism. Donald Glover, musician alias Childish Gambino, has made several jokes making light of issues such as rape, both in his stand-up routines and in sketches with Derek Comedy, and misogynoir and fetishization of Asian women feature heavily in his early rap verses, none of which he has directly apologized for. Jesse Lacey of Brand New admitted to soliciting sexually explicit photos from underage fans during a sex addiction he struggled with in the beginning of Brand New's career. Kanye West ignited a media firestorm just recently due to his outspoken support of Donald Trump. Members of indie bands Jank and Power Bottom were accused of sexual misconduct, which effectively ended the careers of both bands. Several so-called SoundCloud rappers, including XXXTentacion, Kodak Black, and 6ix9ine, have had legal issues stemming from their abuse of women, in 6ix9ine's case, underage girls. Several indie rappers, including Bus Driver, Zombie, Milo, and Kool-A.D, were all accused of varying degrees of sexual misconduct by Kool-A.D's ex-wife Cult Days, and who can even count anymore the number of musicians who have been involved in cases of assault, battery, domestic violence, possession of drugs or weapons, robbery, probation violation, and a whole host of other criminal misdemeanors. I don't take umbrage with the idea of separating art from the artist in and of itself, considering I do it a fair bit myself. I still consider Igor Stravinsky to be one of my top 5 favorite composers of all time. I still believe that David Bowie is one of the most important figures in modern popular music, both for his talents as a musician and his mainstreaming of gender-bending androgyny. I still think Rush are one of the best rock bands of the 70s and 80s for being able to find the perfect crossroads between progressive songwriting and pop structures. I find a lot of early Norwegian black metal morbidly fascinating. Radiohead were the band that kickstarted my enjoyment of music as a whole in the first place. Queens of the Stone Age is possibly my favorite straight-ahead rock band of the 2000s. Childish Gambino's Awaken My Love and his most recent single, This Is America, are some of my favorite music made in the past few years. Kanye's influence on the past 15 years of hip-hop is tangible and undeniable. And I still consider Swans to be one of my favorite bands. My reasons for holding these opinions are varied. I already loved the music before I found out about the things I listed earlier, or I enjoy it as an outsider looking in, or I simply don't feel that the opinions or actions of the people who made it have a substantial amount of severity to them that would warrant me feeling like I have some CDs I need to sell or albums to delete from my Spotify library. In the case of Swans, I don't feel as though I have enough information from either Michael Gira or Larkin Grimm to definitively say if either one of them is in the wrong, and so I feel largely indifferent to the entire fiasco, not in terms of the situation itself, just in terms of the allocation of guilt. Neither Gira nor Grimm have pursued legal action, and only they can truly know what happened on that night in 2008. If it makes me problematic to continue to hold Swans in such high esteem, then so be it. Sorry to D. Brent Pace on Twitter for not saying any of this any sooner. On the flip side, I do feel that a lot of the artists in that big list I put forward earlier are ones that I don't feel comfortable listening to. There are many cases in which I've decided to not listen to certain artists either because their reputation as criminals or predators of one sort or another precedes their work, or the severity of their misdemeanors had a negative enough impact on my enjoyment of their music that I felt I couldn't listen to them anymore in good conscience. Separation of an artist from their art is something that is ultimately a subjective decision. I arrived at my conclusions about the artists on both sides of this divide based on my own sensibilities. You may draw the line in a different place due to your own sensibilities, but it's important to keep in mind that your sensibilities are not everybody else's sensibilities. I just said the word sensibilities a lot. When somebody tells you that they have a hard time listening to Brand New in the wake of the allegations against Jesse Lacey, and your gut reaction is to tell them to separate art from the artist, why can't you? You're essentially trying to force somebody into liking art which was made by a reprehensible person. Likewise, if somebody tells you they were torn up by David Bowie's passing, and your response is to bring up the underage roadie he allegedly had sex with. You're trying to prevent somebody from enjoying art that they like, in some cases art which may have helped them through hard parts of their life or otherwise had a very profound impact on them. This whole Me Too conversation is already touchy enough to warrant multiple trigger warnings, so I would advise you to not add any more fuel to a fire which is already burning hotter than ever before. Side note, more conservative viewers might be asking why I didn't bring up incidents like Kendrick Lamar telling a white girl not to say the N-word, or Lorde canceling a show in Tel Aviv, or Eminem's Donald Trump diss freestyle in that list I wrote earlier. These were all recent sources of outrage among right-wing pundits. I didn't bring these up because I think they're actually good. You might disagree and think that Kendrick, Lorde, and Eminem are worthy of criticism for their actions, but I would ask you the same question you might ask me about, say, Power Bottom. Have you tried separating art from the artist? When good artists are revealed to be, or at least accused of being, bad people, the response is often vitriolic. In the age of the social internet, a generation of young people who are more progressive than ever are, as I alluded to earlier, holding their entertainers to a higher standard than ever. Accusations of sexual misconduct or other similar revelations that an artist has behaved problematically are often met with calls for that artist to be cancelled, which is basically internet speak for rejected. In the many cases of people being cancelled that I've witnessed, the artist in question rarely addresses their behavior in any meaningful way. Sure, they may release an apology and say they're still learning and trying to become a better person, or in some particularly awful situations, try and use the situation to come out as gay, but it rarely results in any substantial or noticeable change in behavior from the artist in question. Most of these apologies from celebrities in the wake of allegations against them are missing a crucial element. Sometimes they'll flat out deny any and all allegations, sometimes they'll admit to only some and deny others. Often they'll acknowledge that they are all true, but they'll often be very fuzzy about the details, referring in nebulous terms to the entire ordeal or failing to provide their own side of the story entirely. These apologies are more interested in saving face than in showing remorse, so it's no wonder that they often go unaccepted. The problem arises when these people who are fond of calling out artists for every problematic thing they do, whether it be something as grave as sexual misconduct or something as relatively benign as, say, wearing a culturally appropriate outfit, they eliminate any chance the implicated party may have to learn from their mistakes. You're right to want the best from the entertainers you like, but at the end of the day, they're people just like you. Sure, they may have more money and resources than you'll ever have or see in your life, and therefore they should probably know better, but at some point in your life, you didn't know any better either. I unwittingly used the phrase Uncle Tom in an older video of mine, and I cringe at myself every time I watch it. Point being, the possibility of redemption from past mistakes should never be viewed as unattainable. There are many stories of celebrities and other famous people redeeming themselves in this way, but there's one that I'd specifically like to focus on. Dan Harmon, creator of the TV shows Community and Rick and Morty, called himself out on his Harmontown podcast in January of 2018 for sexually harassing writer Megan Gans while they were both working on Community, and mistreating her after she rejected his advances. In this podcast, Harmon stresses that he wants to be, in his words, part of the solution and not the problem of the larger trend of sexual misconduct in Hollywood.
In 2000, whatever, I can't remember, 2009, 2006, 2000 something, I had the privilege of running a network sitcom, and I was attracted to a employee, a writer that I had power over because I was a showrunner. And so I did the cowardly, easiest, laziest thing you could do with feelings like that, and I didn't deal with them. And in not dealing with them, I made everybody else deal with them, especially her. Flirty, creepy, everything other than overt enough to constitute betraying your live-in girlfriend to whom you're going home every night, who is actually smart enough and respectful enough to ask you, do you have feelings for that young writer that you're talking about, that you're paying all this attention to? And saying to her, no, because the trick is if you lie to yourself, you can lie to everybody. It's really easy.
He doesn't justify or make excuses for any of his actions. He gives a full account of the events. He truly and sincerely apologizes to Gans and expresses hope that by talking about these things, he can help bring the wider culture to a better place. Gans forgave him on Twitter for the apology. Harmon's actions should be proof enough that people who do wrong by others can be redeemed so long as they hold themselves fully accountable for what they did. Removing that possibility and viewing people as unchangeable entities forever stuck in their ways contributes to the same toxic climate which the Me Too movement is trying to undo. My conclusions on how to deal with bad people who make good art may seem like they aren't very conclusive, and that's by design. More or less, I have guidelines which I abide by in a non-strict sense. Generally, I try my best to believe women when they come forward and accuse somebody of abuse. Given that relatively few accusations of rape or sexual assault turn out to be false, I'd rather side with a potential victim than a potential abuser. I also try not to judge anybody for continuing to enjoy art made by bad people unless the art itself is explicitly hateful in one way or another. I'm looking at you. 1 in a Million by Guns N' Roses. Within these guidelines, there is some wiggle room. Usually when dealing with these sorts of things, I have to take it on a case-to-case basis. I won't judge you if you don't judge me. Cool? On May 26, 2018, Brockhampton performed at the Boston Calling Music Festival. As they announced all their names from the stage, the audience quickly realized that Amir Van was not with them. As usual, they performed songs from all 3 of their Saturation albums, but they remained silent in parts of songs where all of Amir's verses would normally be. None of the members on stage directly addressed his absence, but while performing their song Bleach, Joba broke down in tears at the start of his verse and was embraced by Dom McLennan. The next morning, Brockhampton released a statement on Twitter confirming that Amir was no longer in the band. They apologized to his victims for not speaking up sooner, claiming they had been lied to and that they do not tolerate abuse of any kind. They canceled the rest of their US tour to go home and regroup. I wanted to give Amir the benefit of the doubt. As far as I could tell, his only crime was being a bad boyfriend. He had rapped about his problems with women on all 3 Brockhampton albums and in several solo tracks, and his verses led me and many other Brockhampton fans to believe that he wasn't the same person he was before. If being a bad boyfriend was all that was necessary to take away what was for all intents and purposes his shot at redemption from a life of drug dealing and abuse, then the bar had fallen incredibly low. However, if being a bad boyfriend was all Amir had done, I feel there wouldn't have been a just cause to remove him from Brockhampton. Kevin Abstract met Amir Van on Kanye 2 though when they were young teenagers, meaning they were friends for most of their formative years. If this is the decision he and the rest of the band came to, that leads me to believe that something ugly has transpired which we, the fans, have not been made aware of. Amir was the face of the Saturation trilogy, and for many people he was a key element of Brockhampton. Be that as it may, I have to respect the band's decision to part ways with him. In the current hip-hop climate, there are multiple hyper-successful artists who have yet to fully atone for their own mistreatment and violation of women. Brockhampton has the potential to set a new precedent for how hip-hop culture reckons with sexual abuse, both now and in the future. Stay legend.